It's quad 66. So taking a look at your black box log, I do think that, in fact, this was a desync. I think it's pretty clear. So what I've got up here, top line, is going to be your PID roll. Middle group, middle traces here is going to be your pitch. The last trace is going to be yaw. And down at the bottom, we've got our motor traces here. And so when I'm looking at this, what it looks like you did coming into this move is that you went ahead and you kind of were just hanging out here, and now you set it up and you went ahead and hit a forward flip, so the rear motors come on, and they come on pretty strong, and they get you going into that forward flip. And now you're at kind of your max velocity, so the motors are sort of hanging out there as the quad rotates. And then as you try and stop that right here, in this scenario now, to arrest that forward flip, now you're going to spin up your front motors, and we can see that in the motors here. And they both, you basically go from like 0 to, nearly 100. This is like, you're asking for like 90% of the motors, I think, at their peak. And when that happens, you're basically going from, you're asking the motors to go from 0 to 100. At the same time, these motors are also in significant negative flow, which means that the air is coming up against them, and the air is actually trying to push these motors into a stall. So you're asking these motors to spin up rapidly while they have a strong negative flow, and I think that triggers a desync in motor 4. And the reason we think it's in motor 4 is because as we come through this, we can see that motor 4, it's commanding full on it, and you're not getting the response that it expects. And so then what happens is, if on pitch, we see our set point here. The set point says, yeah, we should be stopping, but instead of following that set point, our gyro is going away from that. You can see it's actually accelerating away. And the reason for that is because when we look at our other axes, so when we look at our gyro and roll, you can see how the gyro here comes away from the set point. So the set point is flat, the gyro is moving away from it, and in response to that gyro coming away from it, in red here you can see the PID responding first, and then the I term accumulates there. Similar thing on yaw. Your set point that you're asking of yaw is flat, shouldn't be doing anything, but despite the flat set point, you can see the gyro coming away from it, and so in response to the gyro coming away from the set point, you've got P trying to resist that, and then your I term accumulates. And these things are then going to go into the motors and cause more problems, because now your quad thinks it has 4 motors, but it really only has 3. And the net effect is that as you're trying to correct this other stuff, that's going to drive the quad into doing things that it shouldn't, because motor 4 isn't functioning like it should. And then at some point here, motor 4 probably starts doing something like it should again, and then the quad is able to come out of it and correct it, and then you're back onto, your gyros are back on set point. So things to look at here, I think the first thing, I think the first thing I would try and do is increase your either your idle or your dynamic idle, basically to try and keep these motors out of trouble in that heavy negative flow situation. That's, I think, the first place I'd start in terms of trying to troubleshoot this. And if that doesn't work, the next place I would look at is your ESC settings, with decreasing the noise by trying to I would say maybe increase startup power, and to see if you can help this motor along in the negative flow. After that, work on noise with demag compensation, and you can also consider advancing the timing a little bit. Kind of depends a little bit on where this motor desynced. Did it desync down here, right as you were trying to spin it up and it stalls, or did it desync as as the power came up, and it, was it basically a high RPM desync as you were arresting the motion, or was it a low RPM desync right before, like right as you're trying to start arresting that motion? Not 100% able to say just from the log. I think if we could get the telemetry, the RPM telemetry, that might answer your question about what Motor 4 actually did here. Since we're here, a couple other things I just wanted to point out that you can look at, because you mentioned you were sort of new, and you said this is like a TP3 build. I'm assuming you're flying on 3S. And I was just seeing a couple things. One of those things is that in general, your RC link, this is pretty typical. Don't, it's not bad. This is kind of what we've seen with, like D8 and RxSR kind of things where you have this. But if you look at your RC command, you've got some pretty significant steps in it. And those significant steps are going to cause trouble in terms of when you're trying to use feed forward or things like that. Because basically you're not giving it nice smooth commands. You've got these real step motion. So as you progress along, I highly recommend looking into something like Express LRS or Ghost, because you'll get much better set point traces. The other thing you have going on is with your tune, I think your P, you're way undercooking your P to D ratio. So when I'm looking at your set point, here's your set point. You're telling it, giving the command to really jump up really hard and fast. And then if we look at your actual gyro, let's actually pull out the gyro scaled so it's a little easier to see the filter gyro. So here's your gyro now. What you see is that your gyro comes late and then overshoots and gets into this kind of slow oscillation. That to me is a sign that you've got too much D, not enough P. And when I take a quick peek at your PIDs, these PIDs just in general look pretty low, and you're kind of inverted here with higher D than your P. And so what happens is if you don't have enough P, your gyro is going to come up late, and then it's going to overshoot and oscillate. The other thing, you've got a whole ton of I-term. Like your I-term is like in the hundreds, and so you can see that you're getting your I-term in here too, and then you can see your I-term oscillating here too. So in general, you probably don't need this much I-term. I think quite confidently you can go up quite a bit on your P. And then you can try, so feed forward will probably help you here too, but because you've got this lumpy, bumpy sort of RC command set point, there's only so far you probably want to take the feed forward, but feed forward would certainly help here, get this to jump and decrease how much of a gap you end up with here, and help you out in terms of the slow oscillation. Basically, your P term, when you have enough P term, what should happen here is that you overshoot and you get into a quick oscillation. So when you kind of like get too much P, you're going to have a fast ringing. When you don't have enough P, you end up with a slow ringing and potentially this I-term oscillation. So, and this clearly looks like you're coming in late and then slow oscillation. The other thing, you don't have necessarily a full log here, not a whole lot of flight, but in general, if we look at your noise, I'm guessing you can probably decrease your filtering, because so this is I'm just quickly looking at your D term noise here. So you probably have more filtering than you need. I'm just looking at it really quick, but that'd be easier to tell if you had kind of a fuller log. You need a pretty full log to kind of fill this up and get a good clear sense of it. But yeah, I thought that was just worth pointing out, maybe help you along a little bit in your tuning. So definitely going up on the P, I think. Taking the feed forward probably higher, and potentially decreasing your filtering may help. And then when you're ready to upgrade your RC link, then definitely going up to a Ghost or Express LRS will help this out quite a bit. All right, until next time, cheers.